Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. Jason and I are back after a little bit of a Vegas interlude. We went to Veeam for the first time in 3 years. It's been a long time, a lot of virtual events. Before we jump into it, though, we want to give a huge shout out to just a few members of our production team, Mark and Catronell. They work very hard behind the scenes. They do great stuff. We saw them, Jason, do amazing stuff in prep for Veeam, at Veeam, post Veeam, and then now back on our live stream.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is far more than a two-person show. So Mark, Kat, and all those who back y'all on the weeks when you're not here, can't believe we're still doing this a year and a half later, 2 years later. It's crazy.
It truly is, truly is. And speaking of what we're doing, Jason, at Veeam, we got a chance to talk through a lot of the research that you, myself, our colleague Julie Webb have been putting together and presenting. In fact, probably no exaggeration to say close to 50 episodes or so of this very live stream have been from that kind of research. And one of the things that we noticed early on when we did what we call the Data Protection Trends Report was a lot of interest around cyber, and we followed up on that. Maybe take us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, so one of the questions that we asked this year in the Data Protection Trends Report that came out back in February, and by the way, the URL for that, if you want to go download that report, is VEE.am/DPR22. We'll go ahead and put that in the chat in the three forums as well. So one of the questions was around what does modern data protection really look like? And so again, as always, you could choose all that apply, and then beyond that, then choose what's most important. If we could go ahead and bring up that slide while we're at it.
Speaking of, I was remiss in not giving a quick shout out to put in comment where you're coming from. Speaking of global surveys, Jason, and this is the largest, I'm sure you're going to take us through that. But speaking of the globe, give us a little comment about where you may be tuning in from. You can see popping up now is where the production staff happens to be, but we'd love to see where you might be tuning in from as well. We've got myself in Colorado, Jason, Texas, Mark over in Georgia, and Catronell over in Europe in there. But let's see if we can turn some more things green.
Yeah, so far we got, according to the map here, we got 4 people from 4 countries. So the Data Protection Trends Report, a little bigger than that, right? So 3,393 respondents, 28 countries along the way, and statistically tied for second place on most important attribute of a modern data protection system was for it to integrate with cyber. To recognize that that cyber and backup and disaster recovery should not be thought of as separate initiatives within most companies. Now, when we look at more of that data, though, from DPR, we saw something that really kind of caught our attention. And Dave, I'll admit, I was a little surprised it was this high, right? Because I think a lot of times in the media, we just get used to the sensationalism that's out there. But of those that were responded to the survey, only 1 in 4 said they had not had at least one cyber event in 2021. The majority, as you can see here, had at least 2 cyber events. And then you can see here, the bad news on this is that in that data protection report, we saw 47% on average of production data is encrypted by the bad actors per attack, right? And again, we're seeing here a majority are doing more than one. And of that, folks are only able to recover about 2/3. So we saw that, and the Data Protection Trends Report is kind of like the tips of many icebergs, right? And so we wanted to double down on it, and we believe this is, again, the largest of its kind in that there's 4 different personas and 1,000 respondents. And here's the fun part. It wasn't fun for them, but all 1,000 respondents had at least one cyber attack in 2021. So we really wanted to kind of double down on, hey, let's go talk to the folks that actually went through this. What did they find? What did they learn? Super scary stuff. And Dave, the URL's on the bottom of the screen there.
Yeah, I definitely encourage everyone to check this out. This is the industry's largest report, as Jason's mentioning, and you owe it to yourself to get educated, to get this data. You can't get it anywhere else. And Jason, I worry too sometimes of over-rotating. Ambulance chasing is a phrase. I'm not sure if that translates well rest of world, but it basically just means jumping on the bandwagon. However, this is not a bandwagon. This is not something that is being sensationalized. This is something that unfortunately far too many of us are actually experiencing. And I like what our boss, the CTO here at Veeam, likes to say about that 24% that says they were not attacked. That's possible that it's just 1 out of 4 approximately that don't have visibility. They're not aware of whether or not their large multinational organization has been successfully infiltrated or not. So don't read too much confidence as if 1 out of 4 is the best odds in the world. But 1 out of 4 doesn't think or doesn't know if they've been compromised. 3 out of 4 know that they were. Any way you look at it, those are very poor odds.
Yeah, considering the fact that that all we were talking about in Vegas last week, when you weren't there, you were gambling, right? So at this point, are you gambling with the company, right? So 1 in 4, best case, you have not been attacked. I was also surprised, and this actually, when we first walked the some of the subject matter experts on ransomware through the data findings, and we said, "Wow, 1 out of 4, is that right?" And our friend Chris Hoff actually pointed out the fact, I think it was Chris, who said that on average, bad actors are in the environment up to 200 days before you ever find out they were there. So of that 1 in 4, that 24%, who knows how many of them are just at 199 days or less? They just don't know it yet. And that might even be scarier than the stats of the 60% or more. If it was Chris or maybe it was our other friend Rick Vandover, we have more than 2 friends, but they were the 2 that weighed in on this data. I also was surprised to find out how many times the same organizations are revisited.
Yes.
By the same bad actors, right? So Chris talks about it like the school bully. Once you paid them your lunch money one time, the next time they're hungry, they just come back again. I think of it more like being an ATM. Once you got somebody's PIN, but however you want to think of that math, that recidivism is actually, I think, really, really scary. So, what do you think? Shall we do take a look at the map really quick, and then let's take a look at some of the data that we did?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a lot here to point to. If we look at the map, we can see in North America, Canada, which always lights up a good portion of geography. North America, we've got Canada. In the United States, we have Utah, Ohio, Colorado, Atlanta, Georgia. Those are repeats, meaning not me in Colorado, someone else, not our producer in Georgia, but someone else. Then if we look into rest of world, we've got Bulgaria, Netherlands, Poland, Turkey, Madrid, Spain, Armenia, and starting to look rest of world, Brazil, of course, great place. Jason, you always like to comment on the food in Brazil.
Yep, and the wine. Don't forget
the wine. And then in Africa, we've got Angola, Kenya, South Africa, and Ethiopia. And I think Angola and Ethiopia may be some first for us. I think Ethiopia for sure. And then looking over in APJ, India and Hong Kong. So appreciate all of that. Outstanding. Well, and Jason, you were talking about sort of the frequency of events of when you get hit and then get re-hit. What we saw in the Data Protection Trends Research Report is, again, roughly 1 out of 4 said they weren't hit. But of the other 75, actually it was technically 76% that did get hit, the most likely occurrence was 2 times or 3 times in the last 12 months. So talk about odds. This is such an indiscriminate kind of issue that we face. And I like what some of the people I heard at Veeam last week referring to this as a crime of opportunity. I think about it as like the fisherman throwing the net out into the sea. He or she may not know what they're fishing for. They're just looking for something, and that something could be your business, meaning we hear of state-targeted events or specific companies getting targeted, but the vast majority of this is any company, any size, any location or geography. It's just completely indiscriminate.
Yeah, I was really surprised. The more time I spend with real security professionals and they talk about things how, in the bad actor circles, they've productized ransomware. You can go to a website and you can launch ransomware from there. And then you come back a couple weeks later, kind of like, throwing that net out or looking for a trap that you set in the woods. And all of a sudden, hey, look, I caught something. And then you can act on it. And it doesn't matter. In fact, over the next several weeks, we have a whole series planned around this where we look at Did it matter based on size of org? Did it matter based on, did it come from the robo or the cloud or the edge or the data center? Did those things matter? So we're going to do some myth busting along the way. These are some of our mostest, favoritist stats from this report. And I think this is going to give us something to kind of talk about over time. Dave, we've already covered the first one, which is, 47% of the production data. Now, sometimes that's depending on who you talk to, the stat gets a little fuzzy. So let's be really clear. This is not about 47% of orgs or of servers or whatever. When organizations were specifically asked, thinking about your last ransomware event, what percentage of your production data was encrypted by the bad actors? Rough number is half.
Yeah.
Half, right?
Yeah, I like this data in the sense that it's actually proving that all the talk around ransomware cyber threats is warranted. It's justified. So when we think about that, I mean, availability wise, we're always planning for a 100% uptime, zero data loss. That, of course, from an engineering perspective is the goal. But what we're seeing is the results say 47% bricked or encrypted. And we've already talked through the frequency of ransomware events for the vast majority of us. These are just incredibly startling or sobering statistics. This is why we all need to do our part from a security perspective. Even if you're not in the security organization, we all play a role. Even if you're not in IT, you play a role, from phishing attacks to other kind of perimeter security concerns. 47% encrypted data, it is clearly unacceptable.
Yeah, and before we mention the other part of this, I should also point out again that all 1,000 organizations that were surveyed here, these were unbiased organizations. These are not Veeam customers. We don't even know who they were other than we set the criteria for size of organization, et cetera. And I bring that up in part because there's a couple internet trolls out there, ambulance chasers, whatever you want to do, that just keep saying, look, even Veeam can't restore their own data. These aren't Veeam customers. Chill out. Anyway, but yeah, on average, organizations that were hit last year said 69% of their data was recoverable, right? So, and simple math here, 47% of your data gets encrypted. You can get 69% of it back, which means you lose 31%. So running on that is right at 15% data loss. Right, 15% of what was there doesn't come back in your environment. So as long as you picked the right 15% of your data not to protect, then you're good, right? But for everybody else, that equates to a bad day. And according to the stat on the last slide, more than one bad day per year at 15% each. That's pretty scary.
It's very scary. And if we look at the next column, what people actually did, mean that 52, 24, 19. I'll just jump to the bottom. The quote right answer, if you will, is the 19, the smallest of those three numbers. And why is it the right answer? Well, it's because roughly just under 1 out of 5 were able to recover without paying the ransom. This is what we should all be aspiring to, but this was not the majority. It was the smallest of the sample size that we got back, wasn't it?
Yeah, this chart we will absolutely be revisiting, and it's one of my favorite pie charts that came out of the entire research project. If I could sum up Veeam's entire mission statement for the rest of 2021, it would be to help the other 81% of cyber victims be able to answer the same way that bottom is. Instead of just 19, flip that over. How do we get the other 81% of people to say, no, I'm not going to pay, I'm going to restore. And I'm going to do it confidently, and I'm going to do it reliably. I'm going to restore. I'm not going to pay. But yeah, there's another part of this which is really quite startling. Take a look at the other two numbers. Now, you Dave, focus on the 19. I want to focus on that 24, which I'm going to say is like hunter safety orange, meaning that it's supposed to be dangerous. Here's the problem. If you add up 52 and 24, you get about 76%. So 3 out of 4 organizations did pay the ransom, right? But 24, roughly half of 52, a third of the folks that paid the ransom still could not recover, right? I mean, you paid, You still couldn't get back. And some of our experts, I think Edwin Vajimina mentions this before, the idea that it's not like you pay your crypto Bitcoin, you get this magic incantation key, and everything just goes back to the way it was. It can take weeks to roll that back, and that's if you got it correct.
Yeah, and
That's super scary.
and it's not on your time frame, meaning you pay on the bad actor's time frame, on their time frame, assuming, to your point, Jason, roughly 2 out of the 3 times you actually pay, you're going to get the key. Doesn't mean you instantly get the key too. So the
Right.
clock doesn't even start until the bad actors issue the key to you, which could take time, anywhere from hours to potentially days. And then your point, 1/3 of the time you decided, okay, we're going to go down this path. We're going to populate a Bitcoin wallet. We're actually going to fund this. It still doesn't work out. For the math nerds out there, if you add up 52, 24, and 19, you're going to realize that's not 100%. The scary one to me, Jason, is that gives us 5% remaining. The 5%, folks, was no ransom was asked for. And the phrase I've been adopting is, what that really says is the bad actors were into arson, not into extortion. They were just there to cause mayhem. 5%, I know that sounds small, but Jason, that's 1 out of 20 organizations. You don't want to be that one. 1 out of 20, we just got inflicted with something. We don't even have the potential of, hopefully, if we can't recover ourselves, paying a ransom and hopefully getting out of it. We're just stuck.
Yeah, that when you first said that, I was actually minimizing. I was thinking like, it didn't count because they didn't pay. I had not realized, holy, 5% is arson. It's not about ransom. It's arson. Yeah, absolutely. Huge point on that. Huge point. All right. So those were the stats that, to me, validated all the concern and all the media hype and all the awareness that's out there. Let's talk a little bit about some of the surprises that came out of this, and surprises / disappointments along the way. Let's start with that other one in orange, because this one's really scary to me, right? So 19% on the left said, hey, they were able to restore without paying. How do you have any confidence that you can restore if you're not testing your backups, Dave? That is absurd to me.
Yeah, that's really living dangerously, to put it mildly, because we've hopefully now proven to everyone, or proven to ourselves, that this is real. This is happening as often, or maybe even more often than we think. We hear it in the headlines a lot, but we've got the data now to back it up. It's not just anecdotal. And yet, in terms of having confidence that you can recover, it's very, very low. Our colleague Melissa Palmer likes to say ransomware is a disaster, but let's not trivialize other disasters as well. We have weather events around the globe. We have other kinds of concerns. We certainly still have failures in the data center, meaning components and patch changes. So the very fact that we're in the business of backup and recovery, and we don't actually know with not only certainty, but any kind of verification that we can actually restore, is hard to reconcile.
It really is. Now, by the way, so what you're seeing here is the stat that kind of grabbed our attention: 16% actually test, right? And when I mean actually test, mean that your backup product, you actually restore, preferably through scheduling and automation, because who wants to do that manually every night, right? But you actually try to restore, and then did the server power up? Can you ping it? Can you mount to it? Can you ODBC? Can you MAPI? Can you do whatever it does, right? That's a test. The majority of organizations, this is obviously a minor minority, the majority, Dave, they're relying on the backup log, right? Or they're relying on read after write tests of the media. I can't think of how many 3-day weekends I have given up over my 30-year career because that was not a validation.
Yeah, I like to call that the return code 0, false sense of security. If for those of you that remember return codes, just because it comes back no error doesn't mean no problem. So, for example, let me give you the classic one. There was a problem in the way the policy or the job or whatever your solution may be got configured. So 0 return code error, but zero data backed up. So that's the bad time to find out that you didn't actually back it up or protect it properly is when you need it. So speaking of issues that we've all encountered probably around the world, let's hit the map one more time because we do have some new entrants. Always like to see this. A couple new states in the United States. We've got Kentucky, Chicago and Illinois there, California also. And then looking globally, we've got Armenia that came in Europe.
Nice.
And then if we look over in Africa, we've got Nigeria. And then in APJ, Asia Pacific, Japan, we've got Nepal and Taiwan. So thank you for who knows what time of day, Jason, but I know it's probably well into the evening. So definitely thank you for that. Should just give a quick shout out too. Jason, you and I do these live in United States Monday morning time frame, and then we put it up there in our various channels, meaning the LinkedIn page, the YouTube channel, etc. And it persists until typically the next one. I mean, there's some of them are up there evergreen forever, but in a typical week, we'll see 1,000, 2,000 people sometimes still check these out after the fact. So thank you for that too. If you're one that's not viewing this live, shout out to you for that. So we've talked about a lot of bad numbers. We talked one good number, which is that 19%. We wish it was higher, but at least 19%, didn't pay the ransom, did get the data back. There, in my opinion, was one more good number, and that was that 46, which is a little shy of half, but 46% of the organization said, we pre-stage our recovery. And by pre-stage, we just mean they don't go directly into production. They do some validation prior to going back into the wild or into production. So they pre-stage recovery into an isolated sandbox. Veeam Quick Commercial, Veeam pioneered instant recovery. We call it data labs. And that notion is really just being able to ensure through inspection, again, not on taking chance, not on hope, but through proper validation that what you're bringing back will not reinfect the environment. I just can't give a shout out enough for that. Now, on the one hand, I'm super glad that that's at least approaching half, but I'm doubling down on this because if you're in that 54%, please consider doing this because you've lived pretty dangerously to this point. You don't want to reinfect after probably taking a long weekend, to Jason's point earlier, probably having to spend hours and sleepless nights trying to get this back, only to be back in a bad situation.
Yeah, let's be honest, that 54%. So if you didn't pre-stage, the other options that were available in that particular question were things like, okay, I restored the production environment, then I ran a scanner on it before the users got to it, or I just monitor. I mean, there was a couple options there that I was embarrassed for the folks that might have put them on there along the way. But let's be honest, it's hard. Yeah. Right. It's hard to do sandboxing. It's hard to if you restore something, whether it's for the test that happens in that 16% or when you're scanning as part of the restore job, it's hard to set up a sandbox environment where you can get there through network proxies and firewalls. It's hard to restore into that because the backup job can only see the production environment as well. How do you also have it figure out how to restore to that sandbox? Then you got to get in that sandbox and play and make sure that it's clean or that it works or whatever. Both those numbers are actually the two sides of that same coin. It's hard, right? Now, it's not hard if you're using Veeam Data Labs, if you're using instant recovery, but if you're using some other technologies, I get why they don't do it because it's really, really hard and complex to do. So, that's as close to a Veeam commercial as I'm going to get for this one. I would point out, though, that as part of this process, I can't count the number of times last week at Veeam On when I said ransomware is a disaster. We're not saying ransomware is the disaster, right? You mentioned that earlier. And when you think of all the orchestration necessary for any disaster recovery, it's the same runbook every time. The only difference is when you talk about ransomware, you have to inject the process to ensure that what you are orchestrating for recovery is clean.
Right.
And so if you can automate those complex steps, make that part of your orchestration path, all of a sudden you too get to be part of that 19% that said you did not pay along the way. Dave, I know we're almost at time, but we have enough time to give you some of that good news in that upper right-hand corner of that right-hand
Yes.
side. Preach, my brother, preach it.
Yeah, let me get my finger right over my shoulder there. That little thing that the Veeam Bear is hugging is an LTO cartridge, that
There you
maroon
go.
dark object. Tape, I'll go to my grave being a tape apologist, not because I think it should be your medium of first choice, but it's a fantastic medium of last resort. And when it comes to cyber threats, last resort can sometimes be what keeps you in business. 45% of data stored on tape at some point during the life cycle. Tape actually truly can be air gapped, so shout out for that. We're seeing actually a resurgence of tape in the hyperscalers.
Yep.
Also, speaking of shout outs, Catronell was letting me know that Barbados, Germany, and Saudi Arabia also came in. So thank you all for that. As we look ahead, we're going to have, Jason, I would hazard a guess to say probably 5 more shows over the many upcoming weeks unpacking all this data. Again, this is 1,000 global organizations that were successfully, if we can use that term, infiltrated or attacked by ransomware, and the lessons that they learned and are sharing with us. Now, next week, this time is a U.S. holiday, so we'll be taking that off. But this coming Friday, our great friends Rick Vanover and Kirsten, I'm sorry, it's actually going to be Rick's team, Kirsten and Corinne, are going to be doing a recap of Veeam. I want to give a shout out to them because they were both demoing on main stage, which was a huge stage in Las Vegas, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. So be sure to check that out. There, a lot of things in what I guess it was 3 days, Jason, but they're going to net it out into about 30 minutes for everybody.
Yeah. If you have not had a chance to watch the general sessions on repeats from Veeam 1, both of them, K squared, can we use that as a term?
There you go.
They were fantastic. The demos told great stories, and they were the voices of them. I used to do that demo job. That's a scary job being in front of that many people, and back-to-back home runs for the two of them. So, yeah.
And
in the meantime, though, we have a whole bunch of stuff planned for the next several weeks beyond the holidays, though.
That's right. And also, we want to make a point to tell everyone, Veeam, viewing that virtually is no charge. You can still sign up for that. I believe we're going to keep that content up for the next couple of months. So those main stage demos, they're not pre-recorded. They were actually live, kind of live without a net, if you will, meaning there was no backup plan and everything went off flawlessly. So check that out, and we'll be back with you probably week after next.
Yep.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay safe, stay positive, stay free from ransomware, and we'll see you next time.